Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Adoption Happy Hour brought to you by NAP. We are the National Association of Adoptees, where it is our mission to unify the adoption community and elevate our diverse voices by promoting dialogue, understanding, and healing through education, awareness, and connections. I'm Marcie Keithley, board president and host for this evening, along with board member Beth Story helping out this evening. We're so excited to have so many of you on a Friday night, and we appreciate your attendance and all the love that you're going to show our spotlight guests this evening. So if you haven't already, please give a shout out to Mimi in the chat bar. Let her know where you're from, say hello, and let's go ahead and get started. If you haven't been to a happy hour before, what we normally do is record the presentation. We're going to wind up about 8 o'clock, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. Okay, we will stop the recording at 8 o'clock. Also tonight, we have Dr. Joyce McGuire-Pavo with us, along with supporting Mimi. This is a very, very sensitive and difficult topic. We talk a lot of, there's a lot of discussion about suicide, but very few men and women step up and share their stories publicly like Mimi's getting ready to this evening. So we know that all of you will be supportive of her, and thank you for being here. Okay, so for those of you that don't know Mimi, can everybody hear me okay, first of all? Give me a nod, a wave, something. Thank you. Okay, if you haven't met Mimi, I met Mimi a year ago at Marina Del Rey at the CUB retreat, and we had been Facebook friends for many years, but had never met in person. So it was a real treat for me to finally meet her and so many other wonderful moms out there on the West Coast. And I look forward to seeing many of you in Tampa in October. So we're actually going to have CUB join us next Friday night. So I'll tell you all about that here in just a little bit. But let's learn a little bit about Mimi, okay? Now, Mimi is a first birth mother who relinquished 2 daughters who she searched for and has been reunited with both. She is past president of CUB and was the facilitator of the Los Angeles CUB support group for many years. She has also presented at several CUB retreats and at AAC conferences and has been involved with adoption reform since the mid-'80s. She is retired from a career in human resources in the banking community. In May 2017, she lost her firstborn daughter to suicide. Although we all have heard the statistics of adoptee suicide, we very rarely talk about the secondary loss birth mothers experience and the fallout of that loss. By speaking publicly about this kind of loss, Mimi hopes to start a more open conversation about adoption and suicide. Everyone, give a warm welcome to Mimi James. Welcome. I'm so glad to have you tonight.
Okay, take it away.
Take it away. Now, I know you've got some special guests here with you tonight.
I do. I have my daughter, Becca, who is, this is my second daughter that I relinquished. That I found her when she was 13. It was initially a closed adoption, and we basically just opened the adoption. Her adoptive parents are amazingly loving and supportive, and has, had my back all this time. And well, Becca, she can tell how old she is now, but let's just say we've been reunited for 30 years. How's that? So, and then my son, Steven, and he's going to stick his head, he's sitting here next to me giving moral support. So everybody that knows and loves Steven, he's here. So anyways, like Marcie said, I got involved with CUB back in the mid-'80s, and I had kind of closed myself off. I wasn't totally in the fog, but I really repressed a lot of those emotions just to kind of survive, being a birth mom. And then I quickly got pretty involved in CUB, and I started facilitating the Los Angeles support group. I got on the board as a regional director. I was a vice president of membership and whatever else, helped coordinate and run the retreats for many years, and was eventually the CUB president. I did continue facilitating the support group up until 5 years ago when I lost my daughter. But, you know, I've been super involved, you know, kind of took a backseat these last few years. It was just a little overwhelming, but I've dipped my toes back in a little bit. But like Marcie said, I have 2 daughters that I relinquished. I searched for both of them. They were both minors when I found them. My oldest daughter, Soraya, was 17 when I found her. I found her, she was in foster care when we found her. And she had been taken away from her adoptive parents when she was about 14 due to some really severe abuse in the home. She was the oldest of 4 children, the only adopted one. They had adopted her after being married about 10 years and never having any kids. And then of course, as soon as they adopted her, her adoptive mom got pregnant and they had 3 other kids, biological children. And truly the attitude in the family, I believe, was like, well, we didn't need her after all. She found out on her own when she was 13 she was rummaging through some paperwork and found the adoption papers, and actually told a counselor at school who advised her to go home and talk to her adoptive parents about it because they were so sure they would be open and loving and explain everything. Of course, when she got home, there was nothing, no comments, nothing. And then one day they were coming home from church and the 4 kids were in the back seat and her mom said something like, oh, by the way, Soraya found out she's adopted. She's talking to the husband. And it was just like, no big deal. But they were always pretty abusive towards her, and her adoptive mom used to lock her out of the house. They lived in Maryland, and when the kids would get home from school, her sister would run ahead of her, get in the house first, and then the mom would lock the door, wouldn't let her in. And then when the adopted dad came home from work, then she'd unlock the door and let her in, and then say, look, she's just now getting home from school, she's running the streets. In the meantime, she's sitting out in the backyard waiting to be let in the house. She broke her wrist one time playing soccer at school, and the school called the mom. She came, picked her up, dropped her off at the hospital to get x-rays, picked her up later, didn't stay with her. Anyways, it was just, you know, not the wonderful, loving home that I was promised. Sorry. So there was a final incident where she would run away and sleep in their neighbor's RV. They had a trailer or something that they kept in their front yard, and she would sleep in their trailer, and then, you know, the mom would say, you know, you really need to go home and try to work things out. And but at this last incident that happened, she ran across the street to the neighbors, and the neighbor finally said, I've had enough, called the police. She was taken away from them, put in foster care. Of course, they were supposed to go to therapy. The parents came maybe once or twice and then stopped showing up. They moved out of their neighborhood, bought another home a few towns over, kind of started a new life with 3 kids instead of 4 kids, and never had anything to do with her again. I had, it's another long story I won't tell, but when she was about 13, I had this really strong feeling that she was looking for me. And I just, you know, pushed down those feelings and, you know, thought I didn't want to interfere in her life. And that was a time when she found out she was adopted and things really got bad in the home. So when I found CUB, you know, I found a searcher who helped me find her, and we found out that she was in foster care. And so, you know, I got in touch with her, you know, we had all the information, and I got in touch with her foster mom, and she said, well, she's not home right now. It was like 10 o'clock in Maryland when I was calling, and I'm thinking, what, she's 16 years old, 17 years old, and what do you mean she's not home? That was my first reaction. But it turned out she wasn't even living in the foster home. She had dropped out of school, was living with her boyfriend in his mom's basement, and she was working 2 jobs, but that was never reported to the social worker. So her foster mom was still getting money for her, and she was out there trying to make it on her own. And so they went and got her from her boyfriend's house and brought her back to the house, and she called me, and the first thing she said to me was, please come and get me. So anyways, about a month later, my son and I, well, I had actually, you know, been in touch with her attorney, and that she had, you know, through social services. I was in touch with her social worker. They all knew that I was back in the picture. And I had asked if she could come to California just to meet family out here. And because she was only 17, they wouldn't give me permission to take her across state lines. You know, so I was talking about it at a CUB meeting one day, and everybody says, that's your daughter, bring her out here. Anyways, so Stephen and I flew back to Maryland to meet her. I had bought her a round trip ticket to come back to California. I went, which was like a shit show. It was a horror. It was just a house of horrors. The woman would take in other people's children without social services knowing that she had all these extra kids living in the house. She would take vacations. In fact, when I was back there, she had taken off to Florida for a week, and one of her daughters, her crackhead daughters, was watching all the kids in the house. And I say that literally. She was watching all the kids in the house. There was porn videos sitting around on top of TVs. The house was filthy. It was disgusting. That's, you know, so my daughter went from one house of horrors of abuse to just neglect in this foster home. So I, you know, the stars just kind of aligned, and her social worker was out of town at a conference. It happened to be Labor Day weekend. We came home to California, and I just knew that there was no way I could put her back on an airplane and send her back. I couldn't do it. And so somebody I worked with had a friend who was a family law attorney, and I called this woman, and she told me, this is what I want you to do. She said, send your daughter a one-way ticket. She was already in California. I just didn't want to admit that at the time. Send her a one-way ticket, call her social worker, and tell them that she ran away and called you from the airport in Los Angeles. So that's basically what I did. And I told her social worker, I'm not sending her back. So tell me what I have to do to keep her here. And so that started a whole process of me becoming her foster mom. In the meantime, I had spoken to her adoptive father, because there was a court hearing coming up to decide what they were going to do with her. And he promised me that he would be there. The court date came and went, and the adoptive parents never showed up. And then there was a court order to have her returned back to Maryland. And I said, I'm not doing it. I'm not sending her back. And anyways, long story short, I did become her foster mom, and she was able to stay in my home. And I've said very publicly before that I know I kidnapped my daughter, and I don't apologize for it. I mean, I was very aware that I was breaking the law when I put her on that plane with us, but there was no way I could send her back there. I couldn't do it, and she didn't want to go back there. So we got her enrolled in school, which is another really long story. She started taking night classes the following year. She joined the military. She joined the Army. She was raised in a military family. Her adoptive father was in the Air Force. It was a career person in the Air Force, and that's how they ended up in the Washington D.C. area, because his last assignment was at the Pentagon. So they just settled there. And let me see. So she came to California, joined the Army. And while she was in the Army, she was overseas for a couple of years in Korea, then came back, ended up being assigned to Fort Meade in Maryland, which is, I don't know what they call it now, but it was Military Intelligence Command, right next door to that other place in the forest that's all secret, the NSA. So they supported the NSA, and she met a guy that she had kind of known their family when she was growing up in Maryland, and they were, madly in love with each other. And one night he was coming home from a party or something, and he was in the backwoods on the windy roads back in the woods, and we don't know what happened, but he had a single car accident and he was killed. And not too long after that, she attempted suicide. And she had been seeing a therapist in the Army that just gave her a bunch of Valium, and never really did anything for her. So she just saved up her Valium and took it one night, and woke up the next morning and was not a happy camper. And so she got out a razor and cut herself up, and called her foster sister, who she was very close to say goodbye. And she then made some phone calls and said, I think there's something wrong. And it finally got back to her CO, and they sent the MPs out to her apartment, and they found her, and she survived. Spent 2 weeks in the psych ward at Walter Reed. I flew back there and stayed with some family friends while she was in the hospital. And things were difficult after that, because a lot of stuff, obviously she'd had so much loss after loss after loss. And so things were kind of difficult around that time. And Becca, was that before or after I found you?
That was after.
That happened after we found you, right? Okay, that's what I thought, but things get muddled. So anyways, she survived. She went on, met a wonderful guy. I mean, she knew him. It was one of Mac's cousins, that Marvin, who she started seeing, and they built a house together through a special program with the government, kind of a Habitat for Humanity type program. And then she got pregnant. And even though things were really difficult between us, when she found out she was pregnant, she called me up one day and she just said, "Hi, Grandma." And then everything was good. And then my granddaughter was born. So all of this, I think, happened. Well, I was trying to go through dates. I think it was like 94 when she first attempted suicide. And then she got pregnant, had the baby, Deja was born in 96 in February. And then in December of that year, Marvin was on his way to work in the morning, and something happened, and his car went into the woods and he hit a tree and he was killed. So she lost someone else that she loved a lot, had a 10-month-old baby with him. And that's Deja, that a lot of you know my Deja. And you know, I think Deja saved her life then, you know. And eventually she, you know, seen somebody else, had another daughter. That's another long story. And Michael, Jenna's father, ended up being like crazy jealous. And so she just decided that she needed to get out of Maryland altogether. And they moved out here to California and lived with me. And this is my opinion. And Joyce and I were talking about this earlier. I'm really sensitive about speaking for my daughter about her experience. So all of this is coming from my point of view and what I feel like, you know, might have been in her brain. So and Becca and her were super close, so she can like pipe up if I'm saying something wrong, you know. But I was helping her raise her two daughters, and her daughters are 8 years apart. And I wasn't even consciously aware of this, but my daughters are 8 years apart. My daughters that I relinquished. And I think subconsciously that like was really affecting me, that I had these two little girls in my house that I was raising that could have been my kids, you know, what life could have been like. She was living in a house where I was helping her raise her children when I didn't raise her or her sister. And they were here for a couple of years, and then she found a place where Becca and her husband were living. It was a little courtyard, and there was an opening there, so the girls moved down there, and they were living across from Becca and her husband, and they were helping her take care of the kids. And anyways, but things just kept going downhill, and no matter what I did, no matter what I said, I couldn't say anything right, you know. Everything pissed her off. And she was going through some stuff, and she tried to go see a therapist who didn't feel comfortable seeing her because we were good friends. And at that point, she was really upset because she felt like there wasn't anybody she could go to in the community that understood adoption stuff, because I knew everybody. And that pissed her off even more, because she felt like she couldn't get any help because of the people I knew. And she eventually just, I mean, I suggested going to therapy with her. You know, I got her birth records, you know, when I was in labor and everything, from St. Anne's, the maternity home that I lived in when I had her. I tried to give her stuff that would help her process things. And but she eventually said that she thought we needed to take a break and not have any communication, and that meant not seeing my granddaughters either. And that then turned into her not talking to her brother. She cut Becca and her husband off. They were living right across, literally right across from each other. And little by little cut all kinds of people out in her life. I found out. So that separation lasted quite a while. We kind of reconnected, and I hope it's okay that I say this, but Becca's first husband had cancer. And when he was in the hospital dying, I was desperate to try to get a hold of her so she would know what was going on. And so I finally, was able to leave her a message, and she called me the next morning after he had passed. And so we had a little connection there. She talked with Becca. She really tried, I think, to, be there for Becca, but didn't come to the funeral. She said she would. And in the meantime, oh, no. Okay, then fast forward a little bit. We had sporadic conversations, but then everything kind of just dropped off again. And then when Deja turned 16, she ran away from home. Because as many of you know, that when you're raised in an abusive home, sometimes you become abusive yourself without even knowing it. And she could be pretty abusive verbally and physically to the girls, especially Deja though, because they're like two peas in a pod. And I just think their personalities, Deja's very hard-headed and very smart, and they just had a difficult relationship. And so even though I hadn't seen her for a long time, she had my phone number, and she called me one day and said, I'm running away. I'm never going back there. I don't have any place to go. And I literally hadn't seen her since she was about 12, almost 13, and she was 16 at the time. So it had been a good 4 years or so since I had been around her. So Deja came to live with me. I let my daughter know that she was with me, that she was safe, but that she wasn't ready to come home yet. And I thought it would be a good idea for her to stay with me. And that was, I guess, okay with her. So we kept in touch, with Deja as our, common bond, I guess. And then when Deja graduated from high school, she came. We were all there. We got to, we were just like one big happy family. It was like nothing had ever happened. She was happy to see us. We had a wonderful lunch. We had a great day. And we thought, our fingers crossed, the tide is turning. Hopefully it would get better. And it just didn't. And then Deja went off to college. She graduated from college early. She got her bachelor's in psychology. She wanted to be a therapist at one point. And at this point, I mean, she had gone back to her mom at one point, and they got in another big fight. A literal fight where her mom was trying to strangle her. And she came back to us. And then another big thing blew up between the two of them just before she graduated from college, and her mom refused to come to her college graduation. It was really bad. So that was the beginning of 2017 when they had this big blowout. And then I was at work one day, this beginning of May of 2017, and Deja called me from, she was a nanny for this couple up in Claremont, and she called and said that her mom's friend that lives down in Oceanside called and asked her if she had heard from her mom, because Jenna was down at their house in Oceanside, and Soraya was supposed to pick her up on Monday, which was May 1st. And she called Blanca in the morning and said, could Jenna spend another night? And Blanca said, sure. And she said, I'm just working a lot. She had really, really severe financial issues also. Soraya did. Soraya had, like some really bad financial issues. And But anyways, going back to Blanca calling Deja and saying, I can't get a hold of your mom. She was supposed to pick up Jenna yesterday, but she asked to spend the night. I couldn't get a hold of her on Tuesday. She never showed up. By now it's Wednesday morning. She goes, I still can't get a hold of her. Have you heard from her? And Deja had not, because they weren't speaking at the time. And so she called me and told me she was yeah. So they had called the police. Her boss said, let's call the police and do a wellness. And then she called me and told me that they couldn't get a hold of her. She couldn't get a hold of her. Blanca couldn't get a hold of her. And she said she was on her way over there. And, you know, my gut just told me that this was not good. And I begged her not to go. And she kept saying, why, Grandma? I have to go. Wait until you hear from the police. Go pick Uncle up before you go. Don't go by yourself. And she goes, I have to get there, Grandma. I have to find out what happened. So I said, okay, well, let me try to get a hold of Uncle and maybe he can meet you there or something. I don't know. I just, you know, I said, I'll call you back. And of course, everybody in my office could hear me panicking. And I finally got a hold of Steven, told him what was going on. He's telling me to be calm. One of the people in my office brought me home. And so I got a hold of Deja. I said, okay, I'm on my way home. Uncle and I will meet you at your mom's house, because, you know, we knew where she lived. And so that's what we did. And then her boss drove her down. And so we got there first. And the police officer was sitting outside of her apartment waiting for us. And he told us that she was gone. And a little while later, then Deja and Amity showed up, and she started running to the apartment, and of course now it's a crime scene, and we had to wait for the coroner. And yeah, so when the coroner left, so the police officer, I think, told us that there was a FedEx envelope on the door, sitting at the door, addressed to Deja, that had been delivered on the 1st. And it was never touched. And then when the coroner finally got there, I asked him if he could tell, you know, when it happened. And he said minimum 24 hours, but probably longer because of the condition she was in. So we're pretty sure that she called Blanca on Monday, said, could Jenna spend the night, and she hung herself. And then so she was there for 2 days before she was found.
Mimi, excuse me, Mimi, do you need a break? Want to take
No, I'm good. I'll get through it. Yeah. Okay. So, anyways, yeah, so there was no note. They couldn't find anything. Her phone was there. The policeman told Deja that sometimes someone will write something on their phone. We couldn't find anything. You know, the next day and then we had to drive down to Oceanside, which is about an hour and a half from here, to tell my 13-year-old granddaughter that her mom was gone, and pick her up. And I hadn't seen her for several years, you know, and even though she knew us, you know, we're picking her up and she's coming to our house, and she just lost her mom, and she was 13 years old. Deja had just turned 21 at this point. And so Deja eventually became her guardian because she was 21. but we never found a note. We never found a note. But the next day when we went back to the apartment to get some clothes for Jenna and stuff, there was an eviction notice sitting on the table that I believe was served on the 1st, because like a 3-day notice to quit. And there was just a bowl of an empty bowl, like she had sat on the couch and ate something and maybe got this notice, and just that was it. I guess that's when she called Blanca, and that was it. So we've never had yeah, I mean, I don't know if a note would bring closure, but there's not really any way to have closure with any of that. Like I mentioned, Deja was a psych major. Just her relationship with her mom and some of the things that what she'd been going through and how she was acting. Deja was pretty sure that her mom was bipolar, undiagnosed, so I can't guarantee that that was her diagnosis, but just from some of her behaviors and her ups and downs, and the way she would just out of the blue attack Deja. And anyways, so we're assuming that she was, you know, she just had some mental health issues, and didn't feel as if she could get the help that she needed. She also became very involved in this church. I guess Deja called it a cult, because she hated going to this place, but my daughter just dedicated herself to this church and would do anything for them, and that became her world. And everybody else, close friends outside of this church, she just cut herself off from. The year before, the Mother's Day before this all happened, though, she sent me a text on Mother's Day, and it was the first time she had, you know, made any mention to me on Mother's Day for a number of years. But she said, you know, it was the first time she felt good about saying Happy Mother's Day to me. And she would make little baby steps, you know, like she wanted to be involved, but then she just couldn't do it. She just emotionally couldn't do it. And then in the end, I think she just felt like totally alone, that she didn't have any choice. She was being evicted. She didn't have any place to go. She didn't have any money. She was Ubering or lifting or something like that, driving like almost 24 hours trying to you know, pay her rent. And she was already a month behind. And when she didn't pay her rent on the 1st, you know, that's when she got evicted. So I think she just felt totally alone in the world and didn't have anywhere to turn, or couldn't do it, you know, for whatever reason. She just didn't have the strength to reach out. So that's how I lost my daughter. And it's been really, really difficult for me as her birth mom, being involved in this since the mid-'80s, helping so many other people, you know, and not being able to help my own flesh and blood. And so I tried to continue doing my CUB meetings, but you know, I mean, there are people here that are part of my group that knew that I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it because I just couldn't talk about it. I knew people would want to, I mean, and this is in my own head. So Sylvie and Joni and, you know, all you people, you know that, you know, I tried and I just couldn't do it anymore. And because I felt like a hypocrite that I could help other people and I couldn't help my own daughter. I felt that I put her on this path. I'm the one, even though it wasn't my choice. My daughter was 3 months old before I signed any relinquishment papers. I tried really, really hard to keep her. But back then, you know, no one, there were, you know, a choice. We didn't have a choice. You know, I was sent away to a maternity home, the typical story, you know, but still, my baby didn't know all that shit. My baby knew that I wasn't there anymore. So this path I put her on, and this home they put her in, and the losses and the abuse, and then loss after loss after loss. I think it was just too much. It takes a huge toll. And then a really good friend of hers from the Army, who I was really good friends with too, she was also adopted. I was blocked from my daughter's Facebook page, so I could never see anything on there, but her friend name is Janice, but we all called her Herman because, you know, they're in the military. So Herman and her were really, really close. She was also adopted, was friends with Soraya. And I think Blanca had posted something on Facebook about losing her best friend. And so Herman contacted her, and the day that we were over getting clothes out of the apartment for Jenna, my phone rang and it was Herman. And she had heard through the grapevine, and I hadn't seen her in years because my daughter got out of the Army a couple of years after Deja was born. But they did remain good friends. And we took her ashes back to Maryland. She wanted to be buried back in Maryland. Well, my granddaughter wanted her buried with her dad back in Maryland. And so Stephen and I got together with Herman, had lunch with her one afternoon, and she told me that, so Herman was around and a part of her first suicide attempt. She was a part of that whole thing. And she told me that my daughter told her that if I ever attempt this again, no one's going to stop me this time, because she was pissed when she didn't die the first time. She was pissed. And so she, you know, had told Herman years ago that if she ever tried it again, that no one was going to stop her. And that's exactly what happened. So I think one of the hardest things as a birth family is that, you know, number one, people don't pay much attention to us unless we're like in the triad, you know, but society in general, they don't give us much, you know, validation. But we, you know, losing her a second time this way it's horrible. And so dealing with death and grief is hard, but when you have adoption in the mix, where you made the decision. I mean, eventually I had to sign those papers when nobody would help me, but I tried for 3 months to try to figure out how to keep her. And I always say I relinquished, because I say I surrendered because that's what I did. I had to wave the white flag when she was a baby. I couldn't keep her in limbo and foster care forever. And I just gave up. I couldn't do it anymore. There was no more fight left in me. I had no way to turn. And so I just gave up and signed those papers. So, you know, I can't tell you how many adoptees in my group would say, I wish you were my birth mom. I wish you were my birth mom. You're just like so wonderful and blah, 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 whatever, yada. But I would tell them, no, you don't, because I have a daughter. This is when she was still alive. I have a daughter. I am somebody's birth mom, and she doesn't want anything to do with me because I gave her away. I didn't give you away. So you can claim me as your birth mom, but I didn't give you away. So I can be that substitute. But when you give your own child away, it's a totally different story. And when you put them on the path that they ended up on, that was totally not what was promised you. You know, we all know the spiel about, you know, you're selfish if you want to keep your child. They deserve you know, 2 parents. They can give her everything you can't give her. You know, all that bullshit. And you buy into it, you know. And the reality, even when I found her, the reality of what adoptees go through is something that we are never prepared for. No one told us that this was generational. No one told us that the path I put my daughter on would strip my granddaughters and my great-grandsons from their mom and grandma. Every time we get together in a big family thing, Easter, Christmas, whatever it is, she's missing. And these little baby boys who my heart explodes every time I think about them not knowing their grandma. It just destroys me. As joyous as the occasion is, there's just this big gap. There's just this person missing that they will never know. And my granddaughters have to live with the fact that their mother left them, that her life was so difficult that they couldn't save her. The way Deja saved her the first time, I think. And yeah, I'm looking at my notes because I didn't want to forget everything, but yeah, I talked about feeling like a hypocrite. So I stopped doing my support meetings because it was just too much for me. It was too emotional for me. And like I said, I just feel like, who the hell do I think I am? Sitting here letting people, you know, trying to help other people. I just didn't feel like, I didn't think that was fair to people anymore to do that. So I had to stop. And another thing I just wanted to say is my daughter was 17 when I found her, and she was 46 when she died. So obviously we had more years reunited than we had lost, but we never make up that time. We can never make up for that loss. We can never go back in time and soothe that little baby and protect that little baby. That time has gone. And so the things that I still struggle with now is that that guilt of my actions. And I'll live with that till the day I die. The regret and the shame and the guilt and, you know, the what ifs, what coulda, woulda, shouldas, you know, all that stuff. It never shuts down. It never goes away. And so I just hope that I hope that if an adoptee is listening to any of this, that it might give them a reason to rethink what they may be going through. I don't know, my kids have, we've all gone through, you know, I mean, Becca has to explain to her 5-year-old where her aunt is, you know, Deja has to explain to her sons where their grandma is. I had to explain to Deja one time when she was about 4 or 5, we were in bed reading, and she said to me, "Grandma, how come you couldn't keep my mom?" I didn't even know they had this conversation. And I had to try to explain to a 5-year-old why I didn't raise her mommy. This is all the stuff that nobody prepares you for when they talk you into putting your baby up for adoption. And it will go on and on and on. This is a part of our family legacy now. This is what my great-grandchildren are going to live with the rest of their lives, that their grandma took her life when their mommy was 21 years old. You know, this is what our Soti, Becca's daughter, has to understand why her aunt isn't here with us. You know, this is what I signed up for when I was made all these promises of my daughter having a better life. To see what time is it? I'm just right about on time, huh? I don't know, Becca, is there anything that you wanted to say or add, or from your perspective of all of this? Do you feel up to it?
I mean, honestly, I think you did such a beautiful job of telling her story, you know? I have no words. I mean, I feel her every moment of every day. The relationship that I had with her is so deep. I mean, it like a twin spirit, you know? And as much as I grieve her, I just sense her and I feel her in every moment, and it just gives me so much peace. And I think it speaks to, thank you, I think it speaks to the power of reunion and the amount of healing that can take place, you know. And like you said, you can't go back in time, you know. We'll never have that childhood relationship, you know, that we could have had, but there was so much beauty in our whole reunion, you know, and you following your intuition and sensing our pain and knowing that, you know, having the bravery to take those steps and unify us. It helped her live longer, you know. It really did. My love, everybody's love, it helped her live longer, you know. And you know, when I've heard of other people's suicides, you know, it struck me in such a different way, but I knew her pain so personally that there was a very odd sense of peace, you know, because I know how hard she worked on herself, you know. I'm so proud of her soul for everything that she took the time to process, you know. Such tremendous work she did in her life. And yeah, in the end, it was too much for her, but I'm just proud of all of us as a family, and just, you know, all the internal work that we've done, you know. And so I'm proud of just the way you represented her and told her story. And I love you.
I love you. Stephen's
Thank
over
you,
here
Becca.
kind of a mess right now, so he doesn't feel like he can say anything, but he's my, like I said earlier, my support kid and my support dog right here, who's knocked out and she could care less. But thank you all for being here and listening, and any questions you have, really truly, I don't want anything to be out of bounds, you know. I want to be able to answer any questions you have, because I think it's important.
Thank you, Mimi. And I think I speak for all of us when I say, you know, we love you, and thank you so much for taking this time to share this difficult story with all of us. And this is what your family's been through. It's just courageous of you to come forward and share that with all of us this evening. And if you don't mind, at this time, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Dr. Joyce. If I can, Joyce, if you could take yourself off mute for a second.
Well, I don't think that I can say very much. Mimi, you were very eloquent explaining your story. And I think it's very powerful and important that you're doing this. not only for everyone else, but also for yourself, because it sounds like you felt like you were an imposter in some ways as a birth mother, and you're not. You're a very profound and real example. I just want to say a few little snippets of things, and then we can get to other people's comments and everything. Yes, the percentage of adoptees that commit suicide is pretty great. Not great good, great large. And that's terrible. And I think it has a huge amount to do with the business of adoption, the way adoptions are conducted, and many other things related to it, not necessarily to the people involved, but sometimes, yes. And I think that the actual placement of your daughter, of course, there's loss and trauma, but when you describe her life, the cumulative trauma that she experienced was horrendous. She, that foster home, that adoptive home was terrible. I'm sure that her feeling when she got, I just sort of thought about her receiving that eviction notice and being left outside after school every day. There's a way that she was evicted from her life over and over and over again. And this isn't on you, this is on life. And, this is the fault of the Department of Child and Family Services, who weren't on top of what they were doing when they were making a placement. The foster home sounded absolutely horrendous. And we all know some fabulous foster homes, and we know some dreadful ones. And she got into some very bad situations that were so traumatizing. And then losing two of her loves of her life in car accidents. This poor woman had cumulative trauma beyond belief. And I think that it's really important to realize, she probably had some mental illness too, but I think it was exacerbated by all of these situations. Mimi, BJ used to love to expound about the serial killers that were all adoptees. And that was her favorite subject. You remember this. Mm-hmm. And it's true. All the big, huge serial killers were male adoptees. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that male adoptees are all serial killers. As a matter of fact, the ones that she was pointing out were all children who had been in terrible abuse situations. They weren't simply adopted. They were, in 3 or 4 foster homes that were very abusive before they were in adoptive homes. And I think it's important to realize how that cumulative trauma affects someone. Because there are plenty of adoptees who have mental health issues, who end up in homes where the family doesn't truly get them, but gets them enough to get them the right kind of support and help. And, that happens more than the kinds of situations that end up like this. And I just say that because it's really important that you realize that it takes a village to raise a child, but it also took a village to do this to you and your child and your children, and to me and my family, my birth family, and to all of the people who were here. This didn't happen by itself. People are vulnerable when they're in a situation like, trying to make a decision about whether you can raise a child or not. And and all of this, I'm not telling you anything new, but I just feel very bad for the birth parents that I know who have lost children through suicide, because each and every one of them feels, any parent who loses a child through suicide feels terrible. But I think the fact that there was a previous placement and loss just really exacerbates more guilt and more loss. And it's really important that we take a look at this, and your voice is so important because you're right, nobody talks about this. The adoptee's gone when they've committed suicide, so they don't have a voice. So it's really important to hear from you, from your side of it, what went on. And at every juncture that you could have, you stepped in and did the right thing. You went to Maryland, you got a ticket, you lied about getting her back to California. You did all of the right things. She couldn't receive it because she was so traumatized. But it was really, really important that you did it. And it's so important, Rebecca, to hear your voice, to hear your perspective, to see, you know, the bond that you had with your sister and the beautiful way that you express, you really understood her pain and wanted her to be released if that's what she needed. And anyone who is seriously suicidal is going to be successful. And it's true that she ended up having a longer life than she would have, but it didn't mean her life was meaningful to her. She was still suffering incredibly. And I think your voices are so important. And it's also important, Mimi, that you have your son there and that you have your therapy dog and your therapy son next to you. Because I think there's nothing that can fix the pain of this, but there are things that can help to ameliorate it. And you surrounded yourself with all of those things. So I just want to thank you.
And all of my buddies that are here that I've known for so many years that I love and adore. There's Leslie, there's Barb, there's Eileen, there's Sylvie, there's Joni, of course, there's my daughter. I mean, and I saw Bill's name up here and my Chris, and you know, it goes on and on, the people that are here that are holding me up, and I love you all, and I appreciate you helping me get through this, because as hard as it was, I felt it was I just felt it was important. And so many of you knew her because she went to AAC conferences with me every year, CUB retreats. You know, she came to the support meetings. I mean, she was involved in this community too, you know, learning from it and getting support when she was in it. And then towards the end, though, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I can't speak for her, but I don't know that I don't know. I don't know what she was thinking. And I think that's the hardest part, is not being able to get in her brain and to have that conversation. And you know, I mean, and I think any parent that loses a child to suicide feels the same way. I mean, what did I miss? I mean, it isn't like I missed things, because I knew that potential was there from the first attempt. And I think it was always kind of in the back of my head. But I can remember, I think it was BJ and Marianne Cohen who did something at an AAC one year, and Deja was just a baby. It might have been in Baltimore, because Deja was just a baby. And I remember, you know, being so grateful that we have this little baby that was saving her, you know, that was giving her something to live for, you know. And I was going to make a point, but I don't know what it was. You know, and another thing I wanted just to talk about, how adoption, you know, the promises that are made. You know, this was 71. This was closed era, pre Roe v. Wade. You know, the only thing I had a choice in with that adoption was what religion she would be. And I was Catholic. I was still kind of a good Catholic girl. that's what I asked for. I went through a Catholic agency. I lived at a Catholic maternity home. You know, the one choice I had was that she be raised Catholic. And her adoptive parents had converted to Catholicism, and I can't remember why, but so I was promised that she was going to be raised Catholic. Well, apparently soon after they adopted her, and I hope to God I'm not offending anybody here. It's not my intention, but this was not my choice either. My daughter was her adoptive mom became a Jehovah's Witness. And so my daughter never had a birthday party. My daughter never had a Christmas. My daughter, the Easter bunny, never left her a basket on Easter Sunday morning. None of the holidays were celebrated. So all of those things, when those things were happening over the years, and I would be imagining what she was doing on her birthday or what Santa Claus brought her, none of that happened, you know? So, and that just shows how powerless we are, that they couldn't even get her religion right, and made the one promise to me that wasn't kept. And that's why I hate adoption. What can I say? Yeah, we're just vessels for people. I don't know. I don't want to get on that soapbox, because I know we're all on the same soapbox these days. But anyways, so many things went wrong with her, you know, and not to make Becca feel bad at all, but Becca has what, if there is such a thing as a perfect adoption, Becca had that. She had two parents that adore her, had two biological daughters, and then adopted 3 children. And her parents are white. All of the adoptees are biracial. They were all raised knowing they were adopted. They were all very open, and they could express their feelings. And you know, when I contacted her mom, when I found her when she was 13, I just, you know, again, I had that feeling that something was going on with her, and I wasn't going to put it off this time. And searched and found her adoptive parents and contacted her mom, and her mom sent me this amazing letter that I will never get rid of, and a whole stack of pictures of her from the time they got her to her recent 13th birthday. And we gave it a few months to kind of introduce this to her. And then we just, I don't know, there's no technical term for it, but we opened the adoption. We didn't have to go through any agency. We didn't get anybody else involved. We as a family became a bigger family, you know, and her parents have been amazing, and I adore them. And so I have this experience where I have the absolute worst case scenario and the absolute best case scenario. And I can remember Soraya saying one time, you know, early on when we first found Becca, that she, you know, she was so happy that Becca had this wonderful life, because she felt that she was strong. Soraya felt like she was strong enough to go through the experience that she went through. What did I just say? Soraya felt that she was stronger, and that she was happy that Becca didn't have that same experience as her, and that she was kind of like taking it for the, you know, for the team, you know, so that her sister had a better life than what she went through. But I'm sure that played into some of what she thought about too, was like, why her, you know? And again, you know, that's the roll of the dice, literally. the roll of the dice. Becca got all the cards, and my and Soraya didn't, you know, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the years that we had. I'm grateful for the relationship that we had. I mean, our lives were so intertwined. It wasn't like we were always beating our heads against the wall. I mean, you know, she was on the title of my house. So we had, you know, we just, you know, I was her mom. She never called me anything but mom, you know? And I don't know. Another thing that I bring up sometimes too is that because I had to become her mom immediately when I found her, I knew she's in foster care. I need to take care of her. I needed to step into that role. I never had the opportunity to totally grieve that loss that most of us go through after reunion. I had to suck up those emotions again because I had a 17-year-old daughter that I had just gotten out of foster care. And I needed to be her mom. I needed to be as strong as I could be. Was I perfect? Far from it. I know I made mistakes. I know I did things wrong, but you know, we all do as parents, but we were super, super close. And so to have lost that when she cut us all off was devastating. And I think a lot of that that grief came up then. You know, after Ann Fessler, you know, The Girls That Went Away came out, and I read that book. I would read it every night in my room. It's the only place I could read it. I couldn't read it on the train. I couldn't read it in the living room. I had to read it in my bedroom because I cried myself to sleep every single night. But that book helped me to forgive myself. But then when all of this happened, it's like, you know, I truly don't know how to forgive myself because of what the end result of all of this was. You know, I'm kind of back to square one. Maybe I need to read Ann's book again. I don't know, but it's been a really hard 5 years, a really, really hard 5 years. And Deja and Jenna don't talk about their mom very much. They don't bring her up. I mean, in very, very superficial ways, you know. Jenna will just say, oh, mommy and I did blah, 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 or something, but nothing about the emotions that they're going through. Deja, they learned really early to stuff their feelings because of the way she was raising them, you know. She was raising them and doing what she was taught, to suck up your feelings, stop that crying. Emotions were weakness, emotions were drama. That's what they were raised to believe. And so they keep their feelings pretty tied down. And it's hard to bring it up. They just really don't, they don't want to talk about it, you know. And so that's, you know, I mean, and so we're all dealing with her loss in different ways. And again, you know, this is a generational thing. This is our legacy now. This is my grandchildren's legacy, you know. So anyways, I'm sorry, but please ask questions. Leslie has her hand up.
You know, Miss Big Mouth can't make it through. And I've just been thinking the whole time how I know how long it takes us mothers to find